Assalamu alaikum to my Muslim brothers and sisters. Today we are going to talk about neoliberalism. We have been talking about it we have discussed three topics related to neoliberalism. We have tried to understand what neoliberalism really is, how it benefits the capitalists, the industrialists, and how these capitalists use this neoliberalism to increase their own capital, how they manipulate the economy, the politics, and all of us. And today we are going to present such an example, and that is of social media. Yes, social media is something which everyone knows today in the world. I believe even a 3 to 4 year old infant knows what social media is. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. There are numerous platforms on social media. We use social media daily, regularly, and it's an essential part of our life. We cannot imagine our life without social media. So now we have to see how it's related to neoliberalism and how our lives are impacted by neoliberalism and social media. For that, we have invited our very special guest, Mr. John Kofos from Greece. I believe all the viewers know him very well. He has been with us in the past couple of days for different topics, and especially we have covered three topics on neoliberalism. Today, we are going to cover another topic, and that is neoliberalism and social media. Mr. John Kofos is a professor of history. Actually, he is retired, uh, and he has authored many books related to his subject, and he specializes in international political economy. Now, Mr. Kofos is going to explain how neoliberalism and social media are impacting our lives. Please welcome Mr. John Kofos.
Thank
How
you
are you,
very
sir?
much. Thank you very much. I'm great. Once again, this, as you pointed out, this is a very important topic. And one reason is approximately 4.8 billion people, or 60% of the world's population, uses social media. Social media is projected to grow much faster, at a much faster pace, just at the same time as the mainstream media retreats throughout the world. So social media is really the future. It's also the future precisely for a reason you also alluded to, which is that young people tend to rely more, tend to use social media, spend more time on social media than older people. The statistics that the Pew Research Organization has done in the United States indicate on a world scale that the younger the people are, the more they are on social media. The older they get, the less so. So there is a generational issue with social media. In fact, social media users are young. Mainstream media users are actually older. The so-called legacy media, the television, cable, radio, and newspapers, especially, and magazines. So there is a generational issue here. I want to start by pointing out that social media coincides with the embryonic stage of capitalism, of neoliberalism, the neoliberal phase of capitalism. And it comes into fruition in the late 1990s. The fact is that the term social media implies that somehow this is a media vehicle. And in the minds of people, this brings to mind, let's say, the London Times or uh, BBC in England, for example. It brings to mind a competitor to the mainstream media. And then the term social is attached before the word media to indicate that this is open to society and there is a democratization aspect to social media. In fact, the neoliberal promoters of social media argue that, in fact, the media business has been democratized because it's now in the hands of the people. Obviously, this is not the case, but we will explore this much more. I want to point out that the first social media organization was, in fact, founded in 1998. It lasted a couple of years. It went out of business. And then in the 2000s, from 2002 until the present, social media really took off. There are many social media organizations. The top 15, some argue the top 30, but let's say the top 15 really, with Facebook at the very, very top, by the way, in terms of users, people logging into Facebook, as well as in terms of market capitalization of the stock and revenues and profits. Facebook, which owns another 90 companies linked to Facebook, in other words, Meta, as it's called, which, by the way, is a Greek word and it means after, beyond. Anyway, Facebook is at the top of the pyramid. The top 15 companies are, in fact, the big players. Some people argue maybe the top 30, next 15, in other words, in line, have a future and so forth, and we'll see about that. The revenue of the annual revenue of these companies is just astounding when you compare it with the annual revenue of the mainstream media. We're talking about $250 billion, and the market capitalization is well into the trillions for these companies. So, and they are projected by financial firms, stock analysts, and so forth, that the future of these is very bright. Like I said, they have about 60% of the world's population, and they're projected to get more and more. And the biggest growth market, by the way, is indeed Asia. That is the largest market for social media. Now, social media is a byproduct of neoliberalism, and as a byproduct of neoliberalism, the explosive growth of this business was the combination of two basic factors. There are many, but two, I want to zero in on two basic factors, and they have to do with neoliberal policy overall. The first one is the lack of regulation. This is one of the big complaints throughout the world, government, by the way. Different countries have different complaints about social media, from Africa to the Europeans and so forth to Australia. Lack of regulation and the insistence that the insistence on the part of the companies, which are the largest 30, you're talking about, as I said, this is $250 billion revenue industry. This is a huge industry. They insist that they want to be self-regulated. They don't need regulation. This is about the democratization process of information, of exchange of views, of exchange of values, of exchange of ideas, and also bringing people together. It's a mechanism for social for social communication. So the one catalyst in under neoliberalism, and neoliberalism, of course, as we've discussed in the past, doesn't favor the neoliberal model doesn't favor heavy government regulation. So this industry, born out during the embryonic stage of neoliberalism, benefited from very lax, very minimal regulation. The second thing that it benefited also, because the neoliberal model favors this, is the fiscal policy, namely tax policy. Now, as the industry matured, governments from around the world began to look closer and closer at this industry and began to tax it a little bit more, but they always found ways to pay the minimal possible tax. So you have an industry which is extraordinarily profitable. And again, the top, as I said, is Facebook. And most of the complaints have been worldwide about this particular company, including, of course, congressional hearings that have held, but others as well. It's not just Facebook. But the industry insists that it's self-regulated and that it provides a service to the community. The question, of course, is what service does it provide? What exactly is it that what contribution does it make? Well, the social media actually makes money from advertising. It makes a lot of money from advertising, but it also, so it's selling the user, because the advertiser wants to know how many users click in, log in, and take a look at the product, whether it's coffee or whatever product it is, tires for a car, whatever they're selling. But they're also monetizing the user. Now, some companies like Apple say, well, we don't monetize, but they are in the business of selling not just the fact that a user logs on, but the user himself or herself. Data, personal data. And here's where a lot of the complaints have been. Commercializing the data of the user and depriving, and this is an area, by the way, where libertarians, especially in the Western countries, representing large segments of the middle class, have come in and said, wait a minute, you can't be, you're violating privacy rules here. You can't be using private information. We're trying to safeguard private information. Here you are, you're exposing it, you're selling, you're making money on private information. But it doesn't stop there. There are also, in the last 20 years, of course, there have been reports, especially in the last decade, that they have had a very close collaboration with governments, basically serving as a surveillance mechanism for governments, tracking certain individuals. Now, there's another way that governments use it. Governments also use social media to propagate whatever policy they want to propagate. In this recent, I shouldn't say recent, in this ongoing campaign against the civilian population in Gaza, Israel, there have been reports, that Israel has used armies of people to counter some of the negative publicity of the average person out there throughout the world saying, we want peace in Gaza, ceasefire, Let's end the slaughter of civilians, especially children. And of course, there have been reports that there have been people on the payroll that have propagated in favor of Israel and against those calling for peace and calling for a constructive solution to the problem facing the Palestinian people. But it's not just, I've just brought that up because it's happening right now. It's not just that. Before that, the fact is that there has been a pattern of governments using social media. Before that, of course, and it's still ongoing, it's the Ukraine war, but also the COVID-19 pandemic, where both sides, actually, both for and against, propagated. And governments have used social media to promote, for example, a certain labor policy in France, where the labor strikes were going on by the trade unions. So you have basically governments using social media themselves, realizing that mainstream media doesn't reach the people that it once did, that the new means of getting to people, communicating with the vast majority of the population, is indeed through social media, because there are many people, especially younger people, who actually don't rely on mainstream media even for news. They don't bother with it. They go straight to social media, and whatever they get out of it is what the news is. Now, the problem is, of course, this this mechanism, this industry has been subject to abuse, because I'm going to bring up a specific point, not necessarily in terms of foreign policy, whether it's Ukraine or Israel, but about financial issues. Social media has been used to promote stocks and bonds, to promote investments. One of the big scandals, maybe a smaller scandal, it depends how you look at it, is that social media was promoting cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency, and even Elon Musk, by the way, he would make a statement, crypto would go up. He would make a positive statement, it would go up. He would make a negative statement, it would go down. So the manipulation of the cryptocurrency industry, which is again global, through social media, was very important, because a lot of younger people, in the age when there is downward social mobility, tighter competition for the good jobs, people figure, well, maybe this is the way to go. They read something that some authority figure, like, some billionaire has made, and said, well, invest in this specific cryptocurrency and you'll be a millionaire. Invest $1,000. You'll become a millionaire in 6 months. This is, of course, an abuse. This is a propaganda instrument. It becomes a propaganda instrument because people, the so-called influencers in this particular domain, there are all sorts of influencers on social media. There are influencers for cultural issues. There are influences for certain foreign policies. There are influences for labor policy. There are influences for artificial intelligence. There are influences for everything. And some of these people, I shouldn't say many because I have no idea how many there are. I try to look at, nobody knows who gets paid behind the scenes to promote, whether it's a product or an agenda. But the fact is that social media is a very cryptic way of promoting an agenda, promoting a product, and influencing people by the millions. Like I said, 60% of the world's population is indeed on social media. And young people, will tend to get drawn into the mechanism, into social media, for a variety of reasons. And we will talk about that, but I want to stay on the issue of propaganda, because this is a much more influential instrument of propaganda than the mainstream media, much more so. And the reason is because it projects an image of openness, democratization, universal. It's open to everybody all over the world. We're talking right now, and people in Argentina can log in and listen to this, right? Or someone in Moscow. It's a global network. It's not a local newspaper or a magazine or a local radio. It's global. So you're influencing people and on a global scale, and at the same time, anybody can log in, and it appears that there is a sense of pluralism about it, because you can say whatever you want, except that there are algorithms determining the quality, the so-called filters aspect of it. In other words, there is editorializing in social media, and it's through the algorithms. Now, in congressional testimony in the United States, when Facebook specifically, Twitter as well, by the way, when they were asked about, well, why are you censoring, for example, this material while promoting this other material over here? Why are you censoring, for example, Black Lives Matter, which is has been a mass movement about minorities in the United States? Why are you censoring them, but you're promoting or permitting, and because they obviously they don't promote, somebody logs in and starts writing, you're permitting, you're not filtering out the Ku Klux Klan or some right-wing organization that is against Black Lives Matter. If and you're accusing Black Lives Matter, for example, of hate speech simply because they want to assert the rights of people of color, but then you're permitting, excuse me, you're permitting the whites who are exclusivists, racists, to have their say. So, and they argue, well, that's an algorithm. But who programs the algorithm is the thing. The algorithm doesn't have a brain of its own. The algorithm, a human being has to program all this. So the social media may seem objective, innocuous, democratic, open, but it isn't. They decide what to promote, what to permit, and what not to permit. And this is across the board, by the way, not just insensitive. But I brought up Black Lives Matter, for example, because it was a big issue in the especially during the Trump period, when Donald Trump was president. But it isn't the only issue. I want to bring up other countries, for example, Brazil. When President Jair Bolsonaro was running in Brazil, he used social media heavily, and he influenced the voting public through social media. The Brazilian election was in fact decided by the effectiveness of Bolsonaro's use of social media. In Eastern Europe, from Hungary to Bulgaria, they use social media, especially the populists who connect emotionally with the viewer, seem, and this is a key element in social media. There is this populist emotional appeal to social media where it's sort of dormant. It's there in some newspaper, in some mainstream newspapers, some mainstream. You do find it, yes, because by the way, with the advent of social media, mainstream media began emulating some of their modes of operation to compete, basically make money. You know? So they too adopted some of the methods of social media. They bring them over to the mainstream world. But social media has that kind of an impact at the emotional level, and it appeals to those who tend to be, you know, they tend to be more emotionally drawn into it, and they want to examine, they want to do any independent thinking and critical thinking on their own to say, well, is what this person is saying and promising true? And that has, and it's not just in politics, it's the same thing in medical issues or any issue. And this is where the filtering comes in. There are critics of social media who have described it as the world's garbage dump, because anyone can go in and offer an opinion and argue that in such a way that the opinion is presented as a fact. You know, I have no expertise, for example, in psychotherapy or in neurology, but I can go in social media, nobody knows. I can, you know, write whatever about or epidemiology with regard to COVID, for example, and present it as though it's a fact, and people accept it. And this is where fake news, which became really globally popular as a lingo during the Trump period, when one of his top advisors, Kellyanne Conway, said, well, she was being interviewed, and they told her, well, these are the facts. And she said, well, we have alternative facts. And then everyone said, well, so there are two realities. There's a parallel universe over here, and there's one. In other words, there are facts and there are alternative facts. And so fake media, fake news became popular and it was adopted in the language of social media as well, because anybody can go in and say anything and people will believe it. You know, I remember there were people in parts of Europe who believed that there were airplanes dropping a chemical, spraying the people some kind of a chemical to make them docile, to make them accept, to make him go along, to make him conform, to go along with whatever authority. And I said, well, there's no chemical. There's nothing being dropped. But they had read it somewhere in some social media thing and believed it. So they read anything. You know, and this is the amazing thing, how the worldview, and remember, it's 60% of the world's population, close to 5 billion people, are using social media. And they're not using, and a lot of those are not using it critically. They're not able to discern between empirical facts because they're not going to bother doing any research on their own. they'll just accept it. If it sounds good to them, and if they emotionally connect to it and agree to it, they'll go along with it. And this fell right into the hands of the neoliberals in two respects. In the political domain, populism catches on with social media. And this is why I mentioned Jair Bolsonaro, for example, Viktor Orban in Hungary, Donald Trump in the United States. These people used social media very effectively. Donald Trump, in fact, was so enthusiastic about social media, he created his own. You know, because they were blocking him. Twitter, when Jack Dorsey owned the company, now it's Elon Musk, was blocking him because he was writing some outrageously false stuff. And they warned him, you can't be doing this. And so he started his own company. So you have basically one impact in the political domain, and the other it's in the business domain, where you condition people as consumers. Because social media, although it sounds like, oh, social media, it's community oriented, it's for the good of society, of the social, of the whole. Actually, the values it promotes are individualistic. It's atomistic values. It doesn't promote communal values. It promotes individualism, it promotes atomism. And one of the sad things about this, and there have been, by the way, studies by psychotherapists that indicate that many people, in fact, resort to social media and accept whether it's the political, the populist right-wing person promoting himself or herself, or someone promoting the values of consumerism. They accept that, but in the process of using social media, the sad thing, and this has been borne out as a result of empirical research, again by the Pew Research Foundation that has done this, is that people become dependent on social media, and their identity is intertwined with social media. Who I am is now my digital self, not my empirical, not my real self. It's my digital self that matters. It's the persona I project in social media, not who I am when I step out and go buy a loaf of bread, you know, or interact with my neighbor face to face. So people psychologically become attuned to social media. Their identity becomes intertwined with the digital world, and then whatever is said, the likes, you know, and the dislikes, and that's where you have a lot of abuse. One of the problems, one of the complaints about social media is harassment, bullying on social media, hate speech on social media, racism, misogyny, and so forth. I'm going to stop because I've been talking too long and ask you to intervene by all means and tell me, and then we'll continue from there.
Okay, well, that's all right, Mr. Kofus. You can continue if you have to say anything about it. I do have some questions in my mind, but you can continue your conversation and then I will ask.
Okay, I did want to point out one study that I have seen, which did surprise me when I first saw it. This was a world study, by the way. It took a long time and took a lot of money to complete this study. And this completely surprised me because I had different assumptions about where social media would be. My assumption, living in the United States, was, oh, social media would be very popular in the US, then Canada, Australia, Western Europe, Northwest Europe, right? And then the study comes out and it shows that's not the case, that the most critical people using social media are actually in the advanced countries. They have the most negative views about it. And social media, as it turns out, is popular, especially in Asia. Especially in Asia. And that did surprise me, to be honest with you. But then I thought about it, did some more research, and it makes sense. I talked to a friend of mine from Botswana in Africa, and he said, who is in the medical field, and he said, of course it makes sense. We use it, and he said, look, a lot of people, it gives you everything you want. You know, you don't have to go through any papers. You have people presumably that they trust. It gives you access globally. It allows you to express your opinion. You're a participant. You're not just an observer, you're a participant. So it is, from that perspective, it's important. And then he pointed something else. I don't know if you remember the Arab Spring back in the early 2010s, 2011, that broke out for about a year and a half. Not much came of that, but from the Middle East throughout North Africa, you have basically an uprising, a social uprising against neoliberalism, against policies that were neoliberal, by the way, and impacted especially young people, impacted living standards, people with degrees, but also working people, as they were seeing the gap, the socioeconomic gap increase, and back then, using social media, they come together from Cairo, Egypt, to Tunisia, all across North Africa, and there is this uprising, and there was hope. I remember it. You know, I was thinking, oh, this must be headed somewhere. It reminded me of the days of the non-aligned movement and Nasser and Nehru in India. I was thinking that maybe these people are going somewhere. Of course, they went nowhere. But in any case, social media was the vehicle that made it possible for all these people to come together and to undertake this uprising, although it wasn't centralized. In other words, there wasn't one center. It wasn't Cairo or Tunis. It wasn't any one country that this. It was pockets in different countries and major cities. It wasn't a rural movement. It was an urban movement, and it was in country by country. And what made it possible, the catalyst that made this all across North Africa and the Middle East, was social media. So in the absence of that, you know, this, when it was happening, it reminded me, because I used to teach Latin American history, it reminded me of the Cuban Revolution, when Fidel Castro and Che Guevara said, well, you know, the radio really helped us win the revolution. They used the radio, Radio Rebelde. It's called in Spanish, which means revolutionary radio. And I'm thinking, oh, this is the new revolutionary mean. This is social media is to the people in the Middle East and North Africa what radio was to Fidel Castro and Ernesto Che Guevara back in the 1950s. It's just a means to get to the goal. And that, in the initial phase, I was trying to figure out this was all going, and it seemed that way, except that it didn't work out that way, because of course social media um, is a tool that's owned by billionaires, and they are very closely linked to the stock market, obviously, where these companies are listed, and to governments. Okay. They are very much part of the establishment. They present an image that they're part of the people, but they are as establishment as you can get. And the uh, uh, mystery is, wait a minute, this is a people's uh, forum, but yet Elon Musk, I think he's the second richest man in the world right now. They go back and forth with Jeff Bezos and a man who is in France. I think he's number one now. He's the richest man. But in any case, these are people who are as establishment as you can get. They represent. These are people who want as little tax to pay as little taxes as possible, if anything at all. They want no regulation. That those are neoliberal values. They're not pushing social values. They're pushing neoliberal values. They want public enterprises privatized. They want private. They believe in individualism, not in communal values. So they used, social media was just as accessible to the other side as it was to those who were interested in the Middle East and in North Africa in undertaking structural changes, so that the elites in North Africa and in the Middle East, invariably linked to the Western world, would do something to address the needs of the rest of the population. Of course, that's what the revolution was about. That's what these revolts were about back in 2011. Well, those were countered very quickly. They were countered very quickly with the same means that the others used. Other means as well, covert means from behind the scenes, including getting to the military, to the armed forces, and certain government people that they installed and supported, of course. I also want to talk about one other issue, and that is the how social media affects culture. Getting a little bit away from politics. Social media, in the age of globalization, and by the way, I want to make it very clear that neoliberalism did not invent the globalized economy. As an economic historian, I can tell you that capitalism was always an international system. It was never a local or national system. Capital goes wherever it's going to get the highest profit. That's it. Period. And that's what it has always done. Now, in the globalization age, the globalization part is that they through the World Bank and the IMF and other organizations, as well as governments, there was the demand, the pressure on governments, one after another, to drop the tariffs, to drop them into the lowest possible level, to allow greater repatriation. In other words, one of the big issues of investors, of companies investing overseas, was that if I'm going to take my money, for example, if I'm in the US, I'm going to take my money to Nigeria, I want to be able, I don't want any capital restrictions, so I can bring my profits back and my capital investment back. Things of this nature, not boring stuff, but I don't want to bore you with this. But in any case, they wanted the state to be their protector. This is something that the owners of social media also wanted and do want, by the way. I don't know if you have ever seen them in front of testifying in front of elected officials, but they are the model neoliberals. They dress like they're trendy, you know, no suit and tie, blue jeans, casual dress. They want to appear that, oh, we're just part of the crowd. But these are billionaires, make no mistake. They might as well be wearing three suits and five ties. They are as quintessential capitalists as you can get. They're more neoliberal than the old mainstream media people. And they are they are interested in influencing the values people believe in. They want people to hold certain values. And you influence values through culture. You influence values through a culture that under globalization is homogenized. This is why I started with the concept of globalization. Culture through social media has become more homogenized globally than at any time before. Social media has made this possible because right now we're talking, and this is accessible to everyone. And so people are picking up, there's a dissemination, diffusion of ideas, and it's on a global scale, it's on a world scale. People can log on to their Facebook page and someone from Kazakhstan can be reading what someone from Rio de Janeiro is writing. They're writing back and forth and exchanging ideas. And social media is a catalyst to homogenizing culture. And the culture it promotes is commercial. It's material culture. And it promotes a lifestyle, bourgeois lifestyle, a lifestyle of materialism, consumerist values, and it censors anything that has to do with denigrating or aggressively criticizing those values in social media. For example, if someone from Black Lives Matter says, well, you're putting your profits ahead of my life because my skin is dark, I was born an African American, and you're discriminating against me institutionally, and the person is aggressive about it in terms of saying, I'm calling for everyone, all my brothers and sisters of all colors to come tomorrow and gather at Washington Square. I'm making up some place. Well, that sort of thing, if it goes that far, for example, in the rhetoric, the analysis turns into activism. Activism is what they fear, by the way. The analysis, intellectual, the kind of scholarly analysis, they're not as exercised unless it gets out of hand. But activism, they do fear. For example, take Israel. The sanctions boycott movement, that's something they fear. So where social media people come in on the Israeli side is if they spot activists promoting the boycott of companies, whether it's some company that makes sports shoes or sells whatever pharmaceuticals or whatever they sell to Israel, there's a boycott that company because they are doing business and they're giving money to IDF, for example. That's a target. Now, if you're just analyzing and saying this is what they are doing, and you're simply analyzing, they're not exercised about that as much. They will let that go. but the algorithm kicks in when it goes from analysis to activism. That's when it kicks in. And that means that it is a political instrument, and it's an instrument of propaganda. It's a very important instrument of propaganda. I don't remember. I'll be honest with you. I forgot when it was. I think I was still working at the time, still teaching at the time. That the State Department put together what they call, I think they called it then, I don't know if they still have that name, the Public Policy Division, which was actually a division within, because the State Department is obviously very large, a division to deal with social media and to use social media as a means of influencing the public on US foreign policy. In other words, they were modernizing. They figured, well, the world is moving, technology is moving. Now, some people have argued, by the way, this is where technology is taking society. Hey, we're just adapting to technology, which is fine. It's true. Yes, that's exactly right. But how technology is used is the issue, and for whose benefit. Who is, at the end of the month, who is making the huge profits as a result of exploiting the user of social media, everything as a consumer, from a consumer to personal data information, selling and monetizing the personal data information. Who's benefiting from all that? So this is not just an innocuous communication mechanism. It's a profit. It's a hugely profitable enterprise. When you got $250 billion on an annual basis in revenue, you're talking huge money here. This is a lot of money. Okay, I'll stop there and ask you to if you have any questions. Go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Kofos, well, you just said that social media is impacting the culture. You have just explained in detail that how social media has affected the culture. There is a very recent example of how social media is impacting the culture, and our local viewers in Pakistan, India, or other related countries can relate to it. Uh, TikTok is a very popular platform for creating short videos that are their duration is usually of 15 seconds, 30 seconds, and to 1 minute, 5 minutes, or 10 minutes whatsoever. TikTok has been misused by our current generation here in Pakistan, especially the young girls. They apply a lot of makeup. They look very good, and
Okay.
they lip sync popular songs. And by doing all of that, they there is a culture of adultery which has become much widespread here, and they have done it to the extent that our religious clerics have been forced to consider using TikTok a sinful act.
Mm-hmm.
So, from that perspective, we can consider that social media has the misuse of social media actually by our young generation has totally crippled our morality, our values of the society.
Okay, that's an excellent. What you're bringing up about Pakistan is an excellent example about the homogenization of world culture, which is Western values, Western culture, Western lifestyles. You brought up makeup of the young girls, for example. Okay. What you're talking about is the commercialization of that culture brought from the West to Pakistan. And the thing is that it is done instantly because social media, the technology is an instant technology. You know, somebody in New York is instantly in communication with um, Pakistan. You have basically instant communication, instant influence. This would never obviously be possible in ancient Athens, nor was it possible in 18th century Great Britain or 19th century US, and it certainly wasn't possible before the internet. Now technology has made this possible. So what you have is this instant influence of lifestyle, cultural, and values. They value this, they value the like. And interestingly enough, Asad, I'm glad you brought that up about what's happening in Pakistan with young people, because it's interesting that they pick up that stuff. They pick up mostly stuff that is Western trendy and geared toward commerce, but they don't pick up because the West doesn't have only bad stuff. There's a lot of good stuff in the West as well, by the way, but they don't pick up the positive, and that is also characteristic of what happened. What you're talking about there in the Soviet bloc, when the Soviet bloc collapsed by 1990-91, Eastern Europeans, Russians, throughout the Balkans, Eastern Europe, and Russia, and I met some of them, believe me, and I was amazed that they would pick up the worst tendencies of capitalism, the worst tendencies of Western culture, and for some reason they were attracted and identified Westernization with that. Now, with the advent of social media makes it instant. It speeds up everything, in other words. The technology speeds up everything. And so the result is what you just alluded to in Pakistan. Now, the fact is that, as you said, well, the clergy is upset and the clergy can just as easily use it. And the clergy can, by the way, because the clergy in the United States and Western countries is using it. Okay? For their own reasons, other agendas that they're fulfilling. Some of them are using it just asking people to send in money. A lot of the evangelical churches, for example. Others are using it to support Israel, for example. So you have basically different agendas, but it's there for everybody to use.
Yes, Mr. Kofus, I agree with you that TikTok or any other social media platform can be used for different agendas by different people. Everyone has his or her own agenda. But in Pakistan, even religious clerics use TikTok. Many people use TikTok. People use for promoting it. People use it for different uses. But the main reason that TikTok has become famous, or you can say infamous, is because of that same issue that girls are misusing it uh, trying to spread adultery and ruining the culture here. So we have to
I
say.
just remember. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Now I have a question. You just said that there is more following of social media in other countries, like you just mentioned, in Asia, Africa, and other parts of the world,
Indonesia,
instead of,
Thailand.
yes, instead of the world where it developed. Most of the social media platforms come to us from the US About all of them were
Yes,
developed in the US except for a TikTok or something like that. They were developed in China, but most of them, like YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, Twitter. Twitter is now X. All of these have been developed in US. Now,
yes, in California. Most are based in California.
yes, most of them are based in the California and even in Silicon Valley, if I'm not wrong.
Yes,
Uh,
yes, in Silicon Valley.
okay, now I have a question. China is famous for its internet censorship in Asia. It's famous for censoring social media, especially YouTube has been censored in China. I was talking to someone in China recently, and that person told me that YouTube is not accessible there. China has censored Facebook many times. So, how do you see what is China's agenda of censoring social media? If it has something to do with neoliberalism or something, what is China's perspective of censoring social media?
Okay. First of all, I'm glad you did bring up China. China has one state society. One party state. Sorry, one party state. In other words, the Communist Party of China is the only party that governs. Period. That political party, and perhaps we can have another discussion on China, just on China at some point, but that party has resisted since the 1980s the so-called Washington Consensus, in other words, neoliberalism. It has adopted, to be honest with you, aspects of neoliberalism, not only in its political economy and its policies, its tax policies, some of its investment policies, some of the capital flow policies, and even some cultural stuff. However, the state in China remains dominant. The fact is that there is the legacy of Mao, which lingers. And Mao believed in a strong state structure, and he believed that the evils that he tried to undo, primarily massive corruption, huge opium problem when he took over, he and Chou Enlai took over. There were gambling, prostitution. He considered all those bad aspects of society, the decadent aspects of society, a reflection of capitalist decadence. Now, so the Chinese have been reluctant to allow too much westernization. And by the way, I have to tell you that I do have communication with some Chinese friends in Shanghai. And they're careful what they write because they're writing through social media. Very careful what they're writing. The state is dominant. The state is very powerful. The state will allow only so much, and then it censors heavily. It censors very heavily. I don't deny that. I believe that is refreshing that they obviously know that they admitted that this is who we are and so forth. It's better to have that and to have the pretense of freedom and democracy and then have democracy at gunpoint in the West. Do you see what I'm saying? Or have subtle ideological indoctrination through social media or the mainstream media. I mean, at least you know where you stand in China. At least the few people that I am they know exactly where not to cross the line. In the West, there is this image that's projected. Everything is, well, not everything. It's not. There's no freedom. What freedom? Freedom is that the more money you have, the more freedom you have. And freedom is really limited within the matrix of the institutional structure. So if you look at the matrix of the institutional structure in the West and the matrix of the institutional structure in China, well, if you operate within that mainstream of the institutional structure in both countries, you're safe. You can do whatever you want. The way the Chinese look at Westernization is diluting this neo-Confucianist system, which is combined with communism, the old communist, because there's no communism as far as the economy goes, obviously. There's social development. That's the last vestige of communism, and they still try to be as communal in terms of decision making. And give a lot of try to empower the local authorities as much as possible, although Beijing still has the last word. I don't deny Assad. I agree with you. Yes, they do. TikTok that comes from China. And by the way, some of the criticism I just remembered, there was congressional testimony on TikTok because the Americans were concerned that this company was moving way too fast, and it was going to take market share away from the American. As you pointed out, most of the American social media is Silicon Valley, and they did hold congressional testimony. I remember the CEO for the American division. He did an excellent job. I mean, just an outstanding presentation before Congress, and and the fact is that some of the objections that the congressman brought against TikTok are some of the things that you're telling me now that some of the people in authority in Pakistan are bringing against TikTok. In China, they know exactly where they stand, so they won't cross that line. Outside of China, they operate under different rules. They operate under the pluralist neoliberal rules. Within China, it's neoliberalism on economic policy as far as the Chinese state allows. They won't cross the lines of castigating the Communist Party of China or crossing cultural taboos. They won't do anything that offends the censors in China in terms of putting on any material that they know is going to get them in trouble. I don't know if that's a good explanation or not, and I'm not trying to defend, by the way, I'm far from it. I've been critical of China. I'm not trying to defend China, but the fact is that people know where they stand with the regime. This is the policy within that mainstream structure. You can operate. You can't operate outside of it, and that's where they are on social media.
Okay, Mr. Kofus, so far the questions are finished on my part. If there is anything which I may have missed and it is important to this conversation, you can tell it, and you can also give a final message in which you can advise the viewers on how to use social media properly, what can be the solution to all of that neoliberalism influenced social media usage.
My final thoughts on social media are that it should never be a substitute. I don't have anything against social media. I use social media. I use LinkedIn, as you know. We both use LinkedIn, and we use YouTube. That's fine. And there can be constructive use of social media. I don't want to dismiss social media. Social media is just an instrument. What matters is how it's used. Like artificial intelligence. In this forthcoming book that I have a whole chapter on artificial intelligence, because there's so much about, there's a lot of fear about artificial. I have nothing against artificial intelligence, but how it will be used to impact society, that's where the problem rests. And it's the same thing with social media, which, by the way, uses artificial intelligence as well. So where I'm at here is, I believe that the social media, I have nothing against the progress, technological progress, scientific progress, nothing at all. I believe that it's fine if it's used for society's improvement and for the improvement of individuals. The problem that I see, and the problem that has been documented, is the exploitative aspect of social media. In terms of monetary exploitation, even resorting to using the data of the user, let alone turning it over to the FBI because the person happened to be Black Lives Matter member, which is protected under the Constitution of the United States. They're free to. Freedom of assembly is protected by the Constitution. In any case, the exploitation aspect is where we have the problem. That's one issue. The second is that it should not be a substitute, and this is very clear. It should be very obvious to everyone, especially young people. This is not a substitute for education. This is more entertainment. Nor is it a substitute for social interaction. There are studies by psychotherapists which indicate that actually social media and its chronic use and dependency engenders alienation in the individual. It alienates rather than connects. Human beings are, I believe in Aristotle's dictum, he's saying that human beings are social animals. We're social animals. There's nothing more wonderful than meetings face to face and talking to a human being, rather than using Facebook or Twitter or writing and having this digital identity. I think that the world has gone too far with, and that's where I have concerns with artificial intelligence, because it will speed that up even more, has gone too far in roboticizing, not sure that's even a word, in making human beings into robots. And that's where I have a problem with social media. I don't want to see human beings, young people, especially younger people. Young minds are so impressionable. They're like sponges. They absorb. And to condition a young mind to be like a little robot, a digitized robot, my God, what is that? There's nothing wrong with going into a forest and enjoying the forest and the birds, and going to the sea, going fishing and so forth. Nature is still good. Human beings were meant to, we're animals. We're meant to be in nature. We're not meant to be in front of a screen writing to someone in Kazakhstan uh, about how we feel and whether they like us. And that those are some of the concerns that I have.
Okay, Mr. Kofus, well, I agree with you. Social media has alienated people. Two people are sitting with each other and they're not talking to each other. They are just using a cell phone and they are so much motivated with it. They're ignoring each other and they are just so much involved in it. They don't know if there is another person sitting. And that is,
Yes.
the what I believe is that is uh, it is the destruction of mankind. Human is a social animal, and uh, to all the human beings, I will second Mr. Kofus that people should actually use it for a purpose, for a positive purpose. But you should not ignore the basic benefits of a natural life. You know, you
That's
wake up in the
exactly right.
morning, you walk in the
That's
park,
exact.
you are jogging, you're exercising, you're playing physical games. You can play outdoor games like football or anything
Mhm.
like that, golf or whatever. So that is how life should be. It is not a good life. It is not a real life. You are creating a fake identity and you are just so much involved in that digital world that you have forgotten the real world. You have forgotten who you are and you have forgotten what you need to do in your practical life. And in today's world, the youngsters are so much involved in social media that they have been alienated from practicality. They don't know what they have to achieve in life. They don't know how to spend the life, how to fulfill all the responsibilities of life. A young man has, any male or female has. They have to feed their family. They have to play an important role in the society. But unfortunately, the misuse of social media is crippling the society everywhere in the world. Well, I am thankful to all the viewers for watching
Thank
this video, and I believe that most of people have not liked this conversation because it goes against their desires. Most of the people who love social media, they will, I believe, they will,
Thank you very
they
much.
may abuse, they may uh, comment against it. But anyhow, I'm thankful to all the viewers. Please do share your opinions in the comment section. And I'm also very, very thankful to Mr. John Coffers for sharing his valuable insights in his precious time. Thank you for your
Thank
time. Bye bye.
thank you. Bye bye. Bye.